Thank you all for joining us. We're thrilled to have you all. It's going to be such a great session today. Thank you so much. We have a great session for you today, the Social Impact Educators series that we've launched. We've already done our first session. This will be our second one. And today's we're focusing on social entrepreneurship research trends for all of you that are working so hard on researching and publishing. We really think that you're going to get some great examples and opportunities to learn from our scholars who are with us today. So thank you for joining us. We would love for you to all introduce yourselves in the chat. So in the chat, put your name, your organization that you're with, and feel free to add your LinkedIn. That's great. But what are you looking forward to in this session today? So if there's anything specific that you're looking forward to, we'd love to know that as well. It's a great way for us to network and get to know one another from so many different places in the world. And it really allows us to connect with one another. Also in the chat, as you're introducing yourself in your organization that you represent, again, put in if you have a question for the speakers, we'll be able to have time for Q&A as well. So happy to share those messages as well. Let me go ahead and introduce our amazing group of speakers today, and then we'll have a question and answer and panel discussion at the end. Elisa Alt is a professor at King's College in London. And she focuses on innovation for impact and entrepreneurship and the next generation of family businesses, which is fun. She works with undergraduate and postgrads as well. In her research, she looks at entrepreneurial agents, enabling value creation, and looks at both the social and environmental needs of social entrepreneurs. And love having her today. She hails from Brazil, if you wonder where the accent's coming from. And she loves strength training, so strength training advocate. Sophie Bacq, I think a lot of us all know because she's been around for a long time during the Social Entrepreneurship Research Conference. She's a professor of social entrepreneurship and the Coca-Cola Foundation Chair in Sustainable Development at IMD. She's definitely a thought leader. We love having her involved in these events and love the annual Social Entrepreneurship Conference. It is the best one. I'd love to say that. I think it's a fantastic one, and moving it to IMD this year was great. She was recently named as one of the Thinkers 50 radar list for management thinkers and who to watch. And I don't know about you guys, but I've been watching her for a while. But Sophie, if you know her, she's been hobbling because she broke her foot earlier this year, and so she's ready to be back, and she goes to conferences even in the booth. So Sreevas hails from India right now. He is our go-to person. He does a lot of on-the-ground, in-the-field research, but he also teaches. So professor at the University of Glasgow on international business and entrepreneurship, focuses on the understanding of the strategic and ecosystem enablers in innovation and startups and tackling the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. He has great research track record, but I love the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report that's going to be coming out soon, talking about social impact and the work of the social and environmental impact that's been gleaned from the GEM data this year. So that's exciting as well. And don't get worried if he's a little sweaty there because he's based in India, and you know how much that air conditioning is there. Oh, none existed. So let's kick off with Sophie. You're up next. And keep putting in the chat your name and organization. Thanks, Sophie.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. What warm and fun introductions, Debbie. It's great to be here. It's indeed not my first time. I just love hanging out with Catalyst 2030 and all of the great programs that you have for social entrepreneurship educators and researchers worldwide. So it's great to see Raja, Bart, Miriam, Tomei, Georgios. I saw a few familiar names. I can't see your faces in the chat, but welcome to everyone, and super happy to meet new people when we break out later. So I was asked to talk about the social entrepreneurship research trends, and I was inspired, as you'll see on the next slide, by a very recent paper by former colleagues from Indiana University, Don Caraco and Jeff Covin, on a reflection and a reflective analysis of 50 years of entrepreneurship, recalling the past, examining the present, and foreshadowing the future. And so I looked at what they did, and on the next slide, you see that there are 6 dimensions that they tap into their new research article: the origins and evolution of entrepreneurship, academic growth of the field, theoretical perspectives, adjacent domains, current trends, and community. And so I use this as a framework for my short talk today. And so starting with origins and evolution, on the next slide, you see a citation tree that comes from a published paper with Sid Vedula and co-authors that was published in the Academy of Management Annals that compares the evolution of social entrepreneurship and environmental entrepreneurship. So first here you have a citation tree of social entrepreneurship. So you can see, the evolution of the field really clearly dating back to 2006 with foundational scholars such as J. Werawardena. I think he was from Indonesia. I have lost touch with him, but you also may remember the paper by Sharir. So here I'm looking, I don't know, Komi is managing the mouse here, but you're looking at all of the authors who really kind of founded the field: Sharon Lerner, Austin et al., Perodo, and Joanna Meyer, of course, who's been with us. And then you can go year by year and see how the field evolved. What's interesting looking at the next slide is that we compared how the field of social entrepreneurship was evolving by contrast to the field of environmental entrepreneurship, which actually has much longer roots. So Pataskia, Keogh, Anderson started publishing on environmental entrepreneurship back in the 90s. And so you can see how here the two fields evolved. But from a publication standpoint, that's the growth aspect of the field. In the next slide, you see that social entrepreneurship as a field of research is growing quite fast, right? So the blue line is the cumulative publications on social entrepreneurship compared to environmental entrepreneurship. So I think the field is growing steady. And in terms of theories and domains, here are some of the observations I would make reflecting on years of research, almost 2 decades of research on social entrepreneurship. So on the next slide, you see that in theories, what my analysis would indicate is that hybridity is a theory that has been, used quite a lot in the past decade, but is being used still today, maybe broadening the scope of what has been done in terms of hybridity. So in hybrid organizations, broadening from 2 goals to multiple goals, applying hybridity maybe more at the individual cognitive level, thinking in terms of hybrid mindset, and so on. Institutional theory is still very much applied. I see a resurgence of stakeholder theory. In particular, I invite you, since we're talking about trends, to check out the new stakeholder theory, and with that, the writings of strategy scholars from Anita Magahan to Cinzia Dorobantu. There is Jay Barney as well involved, trying to understand how organizations in general are actually seen as multi-stakeholder partnerships. And I think we can apply a lot of that to social entrepreneurship. So that would be an area where to venture if you're looking for trends. The resource-based view, entrepreneurial bricolage, in terms of resourcefulness, there's been a lot on resourcefulness and resilience in the past 5 years in social entrepreneurship. And then, of course, I throw in the hat a framework I've been working on civic wealth creation. So that's for the theories I would summarize have been quite rising in the past few years. In terms of adjacent domains, the point I want to make here is that I see a lot more research these days bridging social entrepreneurship to other kinds of entrepreneurship. And I say this a bit with my editor hat on. This is something that Debbie asked that I do. So I'm an associate field editor at the Journal of Business Venturing, and I, as a social entrepreneurship editor, if you will, I do get a lot of paper submissions that interestingly bridge social entrepreneurship with entrepreneurship out of necessity, how entrepreneurship can be used as a source of good, indigenous entrepreneurship, informal entrepreneurship in institutional settings where the act of entrepreneur is actually very, very different, without actually forgetting the links between impact investing and social entrepreneurship. And so to end, I have a few more slides, but not so much to say, but I'll show them to you and then give it on to the next speaker. And It's like the Oscars. Can you hear the sound? Okay, I'll be quick here. The future trends, Jill Kikul and I discussed it in a chapter. So we highlighted scaling and impact measurement, systems change, stakeholder theory, and community level perspective. I'm going fast. I'm giving you the reference so you can read that, but you can make note of these future trends if you're interested. The next slide I will skip. It's actually copy pasted from the chapter. It's the evolution. I'll just say one thing. It's the evolution of the themes that were presented at the annual social entrepreneurship conference that Debbie pitched at the beginning. You can see, I mean, I don't have time to go in depth. You can see our analysis, and these tables are in the chapter. The team varied from one year to the other, with sometimes more expansion and then more focus. So have a look at the analysis if you're interested. The conference will be in Mexico at Jill Kikul's, my co-director, new institution, next April. So I'll make sure to communicate with Debbie when we have the dates settled. And finally, I think social entrepreneurship is really about community. So there are great groups of people who are carrying this field and the growth of this field. So here the Gronan group, Elisa was involved and led it with mastery for the past years. She can talk about it. The MA's PhD group, the Impact Scholar community, and then the final one for doctoral students and faculty. In the next slide, you'll see the social entrepreneurship doctoral seminar that Debbie Brock took a few years back when Tom Lumpkin was teaching it. Elisa and I both took it, and Elisa helped me teach in Chicago this summer. It's a great group of people carrying this research. I've been a bit longer, but I hope this was insightful. And without further ado, I thank you, and then you can skip my slide. You have my email because it's not on the internet if you want to take note. And I give the floor to my super good friend and co-author, Elisa Alt.
Thank you, Sophie. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Very nice to see so many familiar faces joining and new ones. I'm excited to meet some of you later today in the breakout rooms. So today I would like to talk to you as employees as a driving force of positive social change. And you probably will ask, how is this relevant to social entrepreneurship educators? So let me show you in the next slide how I think about this. So those who know me know that I'm very passionate about the topic of social entrepreneurship, which is essentially looking at social entrepreneurship in the context of existing organizations. I do this research mainly in the context of corporations, but social entrepreneurs can emerge inside even social enterprises, large public organizations, in the government, in all types of organizations. And we see this trend that employees, they want to have more meaning in their work, they want to align their work with their personal values, but companies are not tapping into this potential. So being an entrepreneurship academic, I specifically focus on social entrepreneurs, but recently I expanded the scope of my understanding to look at other types of insider social change agents. You can see a few names here: temper radicals, advocates, employee activists, etc. So moving on to our next slide, to just give you a flavor of what I'm talking about. So Carla Cripa is one example of a social entrepreneur in Brazil. She created this water product, Água Ama, which you have all the profits of this product going to fund water projects in the semi-arid in Brazil. It's a very innovative, not-for-loss business model that was created there. You have Salagos spearheading financial inclusion, and MasterCard, a highly entrepreneurial initiative as well. And you also have collectives of insiders inside organizations. So one such example, Amazon Employees for Climate Justice. So there are several collectives of this type emerging now in organizations. So if we go to the next slide, what I will talk to you about today. So recently I've done 2 reviews on the topic, one very specific on corporate social entrepreneurship, which I'm happy to share later, but I will talk specifically about this review that I published with a group of great colleagues this year at the Academy of Management Annals, where we bring together all these different literatures that talk about insider social change agents. And we consider these change agents as anyone inside an existing organization trying to contribute to positive social change. And this does not have to be part of the job title of these individuals. It could be anyone. So moving to the next slide, we examined studies, so more than 400 studies, and we classify these along 5 dimensions that you see connected in this figure. So who are these change agents? What are the issues and the characteristics of the social issues that they are trying to address, the activities that they are pursuing, and the outcomes that they are achieving? And we have insights across all these categories that can be really helpful for social entrepreneurship as well as in founding ventures, because several of these activities, they are shared amongst any type of change makers. But what I would like to share with you, moving to the next slide, are the key insights that we arrived at in terms of looking at this whole body of literature. So if we think about these change agents and the energy that they put into their efforts, and contrast this with the progress of transformation. So this would be the energy for transformation in the graph, the vertical axis, and the progress, the horizontal axis. We see that these change agents, they achieve small wins, but they get stuck at that. Or if we look at the bottom graph on the left, they may perhaps burn out or exit the organization and they stop. So if we use here this analysis of a chemical chain reaction and think of these individuals as catalysts, and this is really in the paper, it was not a metaphor created for the catalyst session. So really good combination here. We are seeing that we are not really understanding how to get to scalable positive social change. And we need research that is really connecting the dots, right? So looking at how these change agents inside organizations are collaborating with others in the ecosystem. So we need a broader ecosystem perspective. We need to look into different literatures that are examining these specific issues in different areas. We need to understand more about blockers of positive social change as well. We know a lot about the tactics and the enablers of positive social change, but we don't actually understand much about the blockers. We talk about the capitalist system, we talk about the profit maximizing organization, but we don't have the nuance that we have for the actual change effort. So if we start to understand more how change agents can coalesce and really thinking of integrating insights across different areas of research, we will start to understand how we can achieve progress and have these scalable chain reactions. So I would like to close in the next slide with some emerging themes for future research. So some of the key questions that, there are many more in the article, but some of the key questions that are in my mind as I think of change agents. So we see these insiders, these entrepreneurs really using commercial practices as tools of resistance and change, right? Really appropriating these commercial practices, using entrepreneurship as a tool of activism. We see them starting to coordinate with broader ecosystems across organizations. But we also need to understand what would be the personal costs and benefits of acting like that. Some entrepreneurs, some change agents, they can be severely impacted in terms of their mental health and their well-being outcomes. And we need to understand that better too. So that's it from me, and I will pass now to Sreevas.
Thank you so much, Elisa and Sophie, for setting the context, going in depth into social entrepreneurship specific aspects. Thanks for the Catalyst team for putting this series together and inviting me to talk about some of the insights that I've had from my research. Great to see you all here. Thank you for being here. The focus of my presentation is going to be a bit more phenomenon driven, discussing some macro trends on entrepreneurship and social impact, link it to the practice of social enterprise, and then highlight some research directions from there. As Debbie mentioned in the introduction, I am one of the co-authors of the annual Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report, which tracks entrepreneurial trends and attitudes globally. And in the last couple of years, we have been asking these entrepreneurs about their steps they have taken towards social impact and environmental impact. And in the next slide, you will see the trends that we have observed around this. One key trend is that it's the established business owners, which are the entrepreneurs that have, let's say, paid salaries for more than 42 months. They, on average, have taken more efforts towards maximizing social impact compared to the more early stage entrepreneurs. Largely a trend that we will resonate with, given the fact that early stage entrepreneurs have more resource crunches and are fighting for survival. There are a few exceptions to this larger trend, particularly within Europe, where we see countries like Sweden, Spain, Hungary, and Estonia, as you can see in the graph, with a greater proportion of early stage entrepreneurs claiming to have taken steps towards maximizing social impact than the established owners. When you look at the trends in the next slide, you will see that when it comes to environmental impact, the macro trend that we observe is that relatively more entrepreneurs are actually taking measures towards minimizing environmental impact than maximizing social impact. In fact, in the next slide, you will see that 1 in 2 established business owners are in fact taking steps to minimize environmental impact in 36 of the 45 economies that we studied. The next trend that we see is that globally, female early stage entrepreneurial activity is now catching up with males, with countries like Thailand, Colombia, and Ecuador, where this female entrepreneurship activity has in fact surpassed the male early stage entrepreneurial activity. That is quite a good catch up when it comes to the SDG 5 gender equality. However, when you see the trend in the next slide, which is that this catching up that we see in terms of the early stage activity is not yet getting reflected into established businesses. Or in other words, female ventures are not growing at pace with the male venturing. For instance, in countries like South Korea and India, there is nearly a 10 percentage point gap between the male and the female established established business ownership activity. This is a cause for introspection and need for further attention. Delving deep into why this might be happening, in the next slide, you will see that part of the reason might be with the fear of failure being higher among women compared to that of men. So need for attention around entrepreneurial mindset, confidence building, all of that to create the support structures for women to overcome the fear of failure. We also observed in the next slide that there is a lot more entrepreneurs who are actually acting on maximizing the social impact or minimizing the environmental impact than them claiming to be aware of the UN SDGs in the first place. So this suggests that while there is the awareness on the SDGs being patchy among entrepreneurs, a lot more entrepreneurs are actually on ground working out towards maximizing social impact and minimizing the environmental impact, which is what we want to happen at the end of the day. More than the stat that you see in the graph, what really stuck with me is what we observed on the ground from an experience that we had in Madhya Pradesh in India, which is the image that you see in the next slide, where we were working with these indigenous communities on an entrepreneurship training project. And one of these sessions, we were talking about costing and financial literacy. And then a young women entrepreneur from the group, which is an indigenous community, stands up and asks us, what does all this mean for my friend near me and then the trees behind me? We were like, that's an out of syllabus question, because we were thinking more about costing questions to be the questions to be posed to us. When we delved deep into why this question came, that's when we realized that this stems from the unique cultural practices that they have, such as in every week, they had to spend 1 hour at least volunteering for another family in the community every week. And then for how much ever forest produce that they were taking out, they have the concept of reforestation that is proportional to it. Multiple such instances began getting discussed, which in our terminology will be categorized as maximizing social impact and minimizing environmental impact. But for them, it was driven by cultural practices and indigenous traditions. Building on this anecdote, in the next slide, I have a few larger research trends that I was picking up for the future. One, resonating very much with what Sophie said earlier, one trend is at the intersection of social entrepreneurship with indigenous communities and place. For example, the picture that you see on the right is from a social venture that works in the Himalayan region, and they have now started doing astro-tourism. And what you see in the image is the Milky Way that I saw in one of my recent visits to their effort. Another research strand that I see very promising is the intersection between social entrepreneurship and emerging digital technologies, such as open source digital platforms for e-commerce, which is the image that you see first, which is from a fishing community in rural India, where a startup called eSamuda is building these open source based digital platforms for fishing communities to have greater ownership and agency over their resources, as well as data ownership being locally held. The third research strand that I see is the intersection between social entrepreneurship with culture and faith. This is not a trend that I've seen discussed in much depth within the literature, though we now have efforts like LIFE, which is coincidentally also one of the partners for this event, which are looking at the intersection between faith and entrepreneurship, because in a lot of the global south, culture, faith, and entrepreneurship tends to be extremely intertwined. And the example that I have here is from Varanasi in India, where there is a venture called Beggars Corporation that works with beggars on the streets, converting them into entrepreneurs. And one of the service offerings that they have is linked to managing the logistics of working with the local temple, which is quite famous globally, which is the Kashi Vishwanath temple. So we see such interesting intersections between social entrepreneurship with community, emerging digital tech, and culture/faith. And these are the three future research trends that I see of potential from whatever I was observing. Thank you so much. That's the end of my presentation. And then moving on from my presentation, I have a couple of questions for the established academics in the room on social entrepreneurship, which is Sophie and Elisa. For Sophie first, if you could kind of talk to us a bit around how you got interested in social entrepreneurship in the first place, and maybe also then talk about how you got interested in the community and entrepreneurship space, which has been your focus in the last few years, for instance.
Great. Thank you so much, Sreevas. And great to hear you and Elisa share some insights. Oh, it's great to see everyone. I see more of you now. Fantastic. So my background, it's always a matter of journey, right? Where do you start? What happens along the way? And so my academic background, and academic in terms of the studies that I started as an undergrad, quickly were in the field of entrepreneurship, right? So the undergrad was business engineering. It was fairly general, lots of science and business combined. And then I went on to have a master's degree at the same institution, a large university in Louvain. And I think I have a peer here I was chatting with. So it's great to see that university represented. And this master had an entrepreneurship specialization. For that master thesis to graduate, you do thesis in Europe at the difference of some other institutions in the world, we had to form groups of 3 and work with colleagues from other faculties, so interdisciplinary teams. There were some students from law school and engineering school. I got paired based on preferences with 2 engineering students. And this was the thesis expectation to write a business plan, right? And so what I did was to write a business plan for a biofuel, right? That my engineering colleagues were developing with professors. It was so early stage. This was 2004. And that really got me into both the entrepreneurship, but interestingly, I wasn't conscious of it at the start, but this interest for creating a venture that was centered on something that was environmentally friendly. And I'm saying this because in one of our practice, and this was like the end of the 2 years, but my first kind of business plan practice was for something to scratch the how do you say, the windows of the car when it's frozen. So I mean, this was not, it's like probably made of plastic, and it doesn't, you know, freeze that much in Belgium. So that tells you how much I learned about, you know, customer centricity and so on. And so after that, I started as a teaching and research assistant in Louvain. I started my PhD, and I started a PhD with the same advisor, my regards to Frank Jensen, if he hears this recording, who was also my master's thesis advisor. He was running the entrepreneurship program. And he said, okay, you'll be teaching strategy, you know, cases with students like the tutorials, but for your thesis, you can do anything that has to do with entrepreneurship. You have to read JBV, TP, and the other good journals, and you get a sense of what's going on. And he really gave me carte blanche, which was very daunting as a, you know, as a first year PhD student. I didn't know where to go, but he mentioned a few themes. And one theme was female entrepreneurship, and another one was social entrepreneurship. And that just, you know, rang a chord. I was like, this sounds really, really cool. And he said, like, I have a really, a really thin pile of papers, because this was now 2006, and there was, you know, the field was just starting. You saw it in my graph. And so I had the, you know, the working paper by Greg Dees and a few articles. The ETP special issue 2006 wasn't out yet. And so I started reading, and that's how it started. Just intuition, I would say. On community, this is more of a journey in terms of levels of analysis, right? So I started, my very first interviews for my PhD were really meant at understanding who were social entrepreneurs at the individual level. And on that, I wrote with Elisa a JBV on empathy and social entrepreneur intentions. But when you look at my body of work, I quickly moved on to the organizational level, so the level of the enterprise. And this was due because I was also trying to serve the wave of the organizational hybridity, right? When these theoretical lens came on, it made a lot of sense for social entrepreneurship scholars to finally latch on a concept which enabled us to, you know, borrow from mainstream management literature, such as identity theory, institutional theory, and so on. And so I spent quite a bit of time studying social enterprises, studying their business models, their governance, and very much the internal dynamics of social enterprise, and very little the impact that they were having, right? So kind of blindfoldedly forgetting about the end goal, which is the, you know, the impact they want to have. And so this is where in a team with Tom Lumpkin and his PhD student, Rob Piddock, we ran a literature review that got published in JSBM, Journal of Small Business Management, in 2018, where we looked at how impact was being discussed in the literature. We didn't have enough studies, so we probably did the review in 2016. We didn't have enough studies to just include academic articles that were empirical and providing enough substance. And so what we did is that we also ran the literature review analysis on case studies that were used in the classroom, right? Because there were quite a bit of those. And this is where community actually came to the fore. And we found it, you know, all over the cases, different kinds of communities, which I later on formalized. And so this came in 2018. You could say it came in a year before the civic wealth creation piece, which puts community as one of the key major stakeholders involved in civic wealth creation or societal impact creation. The truth is that we started with Tom Lumpkin researching civic wealth creation in a community in 2011, right? So we had this intuition for it back then, but it took years to materialize, solidify, and for the argument to mature to be published in a good journal. So yeah.
Super.
I will say
Thanks so
one
much,
more
Sophie.
thing. Can I say one more thing? because
Yeah,
I
go on.
think it's really important to think about the adjacent fields, right? And we talk about informality and so on.
Yeah.
So Tom had also done a lot of research with family business researchers, and there they have the family, right? They have this three-circle model, and they have family as a core stakeholder. And it appeared to us that lots of the social entrepreneurship conversation was missing a core stakeholder in the in the conversation, which was community. So
Super interesting. I feel like we almost always kind of miss the personality and the journey behind the papers. We only see the papers at the end of the day. So I think it was really insightful for you to share the journey behind how you ended up doing what you ended up doing. Elisa, so similar question, entry into social entrepreneurship and more into how you got into social entrepreneurship.
Okay, so I think it all harks back to my former professional background. So I used to be in advertising before. I had a short career in advertising, about 4 years, I would say. And I was working in an advertising agency. I used to be a copywriter, so the creative team. And I had this very romantic vision of my job as something non-routine and that wouldn't require me lying. And then, the briefings started coming, asking us to sell environmental compliance as, we're doing great for the planet. And that made me feel really uncomfortable and started questioning a lot of things. So I also wanted to study abroad, and I kind of combined these two interests. And I had this question originally, which was, rather than greenwashing, how can companies actually promote, teach consumers to be responsible? So I would have been a marketing scholar, and see where I am. So from wanting to be a marketing academic, I ended up getting a scholarship to do my PhD in Spain, where the marketing people could not be less interested in me. And then I had a supervisor in management who was kind enough to take me, and I wrote my dissertation on environmental management strategy, where one of the key findings, so I was looking at how different groups of stakeholders, how they influence the proactivity of the environmental strategy of an organization. And I found that across countries and industries, employees were consistently influential. And at that time, I went to my first Academy of Management meeting in Chicago, and I met a dear colleague who's now in Brazil, Heiko Spitzeg, and at the time he was starting to study social entrepreneurship. And I became passionate about the topic. I really connected with it, and I think it connects to where I was coming from and my frustrations and my passion as well for the topics of influence and persuasion that connected to that, my former profession. And I just decided this is what I want to do after my PhD. Career-wise, it took a while, for, things that started to come out, but I think it's a really important phenomenon, and more and more people see themselves in it, and also more employers, more organizations recognize the importance of cultivating these entrepreneurial skills inside organizations, because we need these large organizations to be part of the change too.
Interesting. Thanks so much, Elisa. And my personal journey sort of closely resonates with what Sophie said. Engineer by undergrad, and I was involved in a rural electrification project during my undergrad days, and then soon realized that while the initial setup was great, we got a lot of PR around the light being electrified in a rural village in India and all of it. Year and a half into it, the lights went off, and that's when the light in my head really clicked, because it was like, while the people who did the project had a lot of PR around it, the actual communities didn't actually benefit in the long run, because the issue was with lack of maintenance. There was no sustainable business model around how the maintenance of the whole electricity would be and all of it. And that's when I realized I kind of got to understand what social entrepreneurship is, and then led into the PhD of that, and then here I am. So that's the sort of similar initial story of engineering background, but then light bulb going off became the light bulb moment for me to get into social entrepreneurship. So I think we'll start taking questions that we have from the people who are attending the session now.
I'll unmute and ask this question to you, Sophie. I'm really curious, you guys got a lot of funding for the Civic Wealth Creation Initiative, and what are some of your plans for that? I noticed Greece might be involved.
And what was the last bit?
I said I noticed there might be a conference in Greece happening in this.
Yeah, thanks for the plug. Yeah, and you see the AI assistant is getting worried that we're too quiet in the meeting, so let's keep chatting. So we, with Christina Hertel at the University of Geneva, received a grant from the Swiss National Foundation for empirically studying community entrepreneurship and outcomes in the form of civic wealth, right? And so what we'll be doing with that project is first doing a mapping of all of the community enterprises in Switzerland. So French-speaking, German-speaking Switzerland, and Italian-speaking Switzerland. We'll have a team that's multilingual to cover all of the parts. Switzerland seems well suited because there's some really rural areas where there is entrepreneurial activity that is less documented, maybe informal. We'll find out. We have partnered with a Swiss institution that has started mapping along different criteria, but we really want to try to see if we can achieve a mapping exercise. I found your report, Sreevas, fascinating when you can get a grasp of what's going on in a certain territory. And so with that, we want to also explore if these community entrepreneurial initiatives are generating civic wealth, how civic wealth is manifested, what are some of the indicators, and so on. Thanks for the plug, Debbie. We are with two other colleagues, Danielle Logg and Jill Purdy, running a track at the EGOS. EGOS is the org studies conference that happens every July in Europe, and next one is in Athens, Greece. We're running a sub-theme on civic wealth creation. So if you have any research that is tying to the topic, we would love to receive your submission of a short paper by January 7th. Thank you, Debbie, for the plug.
I think there's a question from Satish around the intersections of social finance and social entrepreneurship. Any insights that we might have on this?
There's also a second part to the question.
Sorry?
There's a second part to the question. So he says, I'm interested in understanding how social finance mechanisms such as impact investing, social bonds, or microfinance can best support the growth and sustainability of social enterprises.
I mean, I'm happy to kind of start off and then we can kind of plug in from there. So one thing which I've sort of observed in this space is kind of cleverly constructing blended finance models has been quite interesting. I mean, like in India, for instance, there's been quite a bit of work around river bonds, which is a blended finance model around conventional bonds plus some bit of venture capital, some bit of philanthropy money, all being put together, especially to support the commercialization of social innovation projects around the river Ganga region. So this could be water treatment plants, this could be solar boats, this could be all of those categories of water-related social innovation project commercializations. And the problem was, this is all government projects, so the governments wouldn't naturally come in and fund a pilot stage project. So you need some form of pilot testing to happen. But then for these ventures to commercialize, they need money to do the pilot testing in the first place. And for that, they've kind of created these sorts of clever blended finance models. And that has been working quite well in terms of commercializing social innovation projects from labs to practice, create a test bed for it, and then governments could then fund them going forward. Same things have also been tested out in parts of Sub-Saharan Africa and in Japan around a similar agricultural commercialization product around like a filter of sorts. So that is one trend that I was picking up around the intersection of blended social finance and then how that helps commercialization of social innovation projects. Anything to add, Sophie, Elisa, on this? No? Okay. Go on, Sophie.
No, I just put in the chat. I think there is research on that. I think it's an important topic. You say you've been reflecting on it. I think there's a lot more empirical research to be done to be seen how the funds can be allocated to the social enterprises that need them, right? I agree with what she was saying. I think there's probably lots of great examples around the world, but then some impact investing studies, or maybe the ones from finance as well. Finance departments and professors are focused on the big impact investors, and these tend to fund the larger social or climate tech enterprises where you have impact indicators like CO2 emissions, which tend to be more clear and clean and easier to capture. And there's still a lot of unfunded social enterprises. So this is another report from the WEF I posted on the state of social enterprise. You may have discussed it in this, in this forum before, but I think it states that together they need $1 trillion US dollars. So there's a super large need. So I think in terms of allocation, that's a great question to research empirically.
Yeah, absolutely. And the another question that I'm just picking up is, would love to know our views around the current trends in some countries towards establishing social enterprises in the field of tech and climate, sort of climate tech sort of a space. Any insights, interesting examples that you're picking up, Elisa, Sophie?
No, I mean, I don't think I have much experience or knowledge on that particular topic. I do think I'm still a very much optimist person. I do think that social enterprises do have a very high potential when it comes to innovation. And so these trends, I would need to know more, but I think the trends of establishing new technologies for addressing climate issues, seems promising. And and I'll make one more comment. I think we shouldn't disconnect the climate issues with the human issues, right? In the end, it's also people making decisions, consumers making, consuming decisions. It's also, everyone, in not only consumers, but in their daily lives taking action. So the climate tech is great, but at the same time, I wish to see, that's a wish for the field, to see more bridging and interconnections between environmental and social impact, which is super interesting what you showed earlier, Sreevas.
Yeah, and just one bit to add from the insight that I had is like how we can make communities very core to this. I mean, one is the tech itself, the other is the climate element to it. But then if you listen to what Sophie had said earlier about the indigenous communities and those sorts of communities, they tend to have extremely sustainable climate practices themselves. It is just that in our effort to modernize it, we sort of stretch them to other extremes. But then if we can really build climate tech that is well integrated with some of those existing practices, that is where I think really a strong promise is. For example, in Uganda, there are efforts ongoing where they are doing a climate expedition sort of an effort, which is looking at livelihood opportunities for the community, but then very much embedded in the local practices that they already have. The same thing that I discussed in the Himalayan region. There again, they are doing similar practices. You look at what sort of resources and practices they already follow. For example, they have this astro element, or they have yaks in this region. So look at products and services that are linked to local options and then build tech out of it to market link them. And that seems to be a really interesting space to be connecting communities, digital tech, along with social enterprise. So that is one thing that I see. The other question that I was picking up was, it's a finance question again. It's how best can ecosystem finance models be built for supporting beneficiaries with tools built at community level? Okay, deep question.
Abhijit, maybe in the chat, or what do you mean by ecosystem finance models?
Yeah, hi. One thing that we're looking at is while we're building some community solutions or tools, what could be or what are some best practices to build financing models that one also ensure that there's financial sustainability of that, the development and maintenance of that tool, and at the same time there is a certain finance or there's a certain sorts of payment model that can be built out for supporting the community members around it. Maybe it could be a larger discussion. I'll maybe write down to you more specifics about it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, it sounds very intriguing. I see multiple levels, right? I think one is I was wondering if you meant like the funding of the enterprise, and then of course the enterprise is embedded in the community. If you're also talking about ways to provide sustainable means of livelihoods for the community members. I think these are big questions too, with social enterprises operating in developing countries where to some extent maybe they have some earned income generating activities, and to some other extent they depend on international grants. I've talked to a few of those, and I think the degrees of separation sometimes between these local actors and the funders is actually detrimental to the longevity of their solutions, if that makes sense, right? So that's why I really believe in the locality. But you're right, we should think about the funding of it, the HR approach of it. Who do you hire in these social enterprises, and so on? So good question. Feel free to write to me.
I really like that question earlier about working with the social entrepreneurs. If you want to take that from Eunice. I can read it out for you. Elaborate on a bit more on the link between academic research and the results that you have done so far or done in general, and how they can help social entrepreneurs practically.
Can I add one more thing? Because, sorry, like the Schwab Foundation's global outcome results, we need to create more space to social entrepreneurship. That is why I want to get your opinion on how to use those findings to help social entrepreneurs to make the data more lively in terms of their lives, because we are struggling with lots of issues, and the data help us in terms of like policy building, awareness, and those reports show us that we need to support more in terms of research findings to build recognition of social entrepreneurship in the society. That is why I want to understand how you're promoting your findings through the network of social entrepreneurs. Thank you.
That's very interesting. I mean, it's something which keeps in the back of the mind while you're doing the research, right? Like, who are you doing the research for? Why it is relevant, all of it. So very pertinent question there, Eunice. So personally, the way I have began looking at some of my research, especially in the last 3-4 years, is I've become more phenomenon driven, where I'm in the field, which is like when Debbie introduced me, she told me that I am in India now, right? So which is part of some of these field visits that I'm doing. So I've become a lot more phenomenon driven in trying to engage with the social entrepreneurs, trying to understand the problem. In some instances, it might take the form of a bit of an action research sort of a orientation, where I'm kind of feeding inputs into what they are doing while I am sort of researching it alongside it. Or in some other instances, I'm sort of, when they're in the initial stages, I am just supporting them in the effort. There might not be any research project that might come out of it in the first 3-4 interactions that I have from them. But then like 5 years down the line, when I go back, I now have, let's say, a 5-year longitudinal data set that I have of interactions that I've had with them over a number of years. And that has helped me build my research portfolio in interesting directions, which I didn't think will evolve in those ways. So that I found to be extremely sort of beneficial practically as well as fulfilling personally in terms of how I've begun engaging with some of my research. So that's the way I am looking at the translation to practice, where I'm semi co-creating the efforts as they go along, and then the research is one of the byproducts coming through that co-creation process, where I'm kind of working with these social entrepreneurs mostly from their initial stages onwards itself. So that's the way I am beginning to see some of my research. Elisa, Sophie.
Do you want to go ahead,
Yeah.
Sophie? Maybe go ahead.
I want to add one other thing to this is keep in mind we have a Medium platform, and Raja is actually in here right now, who's the editor for that. And what the idea is take those hardcore academic articles, bring them down to a 1,200 word piece that people will read, and practice that targeted to the practitioners. They can always read the big long one, but they can get the short, the highlights in there. And we're hoping that this will get more to the social entrepreneurs, especially those that are within Catalyst, because 70% of our members in Catalyst 2030 are social entrepreneurs working in the field.
That's super interesting. That will be very useful.
Elisa, did you want to say something?
I can say something. I thought it would be better for you to speak first because you're at a broader level. So I think in terms of research projects that I have been working on and more closely with social entrepreneurs, so these people inside organizations that I told you about. So there is a project. So one way of doing that is co-designing a project, right? So a group of entrepreneurs that I approached, they shared with me that they really observed lots of people burning out and struggling with keeping up the energy to continue these projects. And this was the beginning of a big research project that, so the data is collected, but it's currently, I am analyzing data. So I think co-creation, right? It's a pathway. So listening to these needs, right? So you mentioned, Yunus, that there are some issues regarding legitimacy, access to resources, of showing the importance of social entrepreneurship or social enterprises in a particular region. So I think it's about also finding research partners that can really help you with those practical challenges, but also thinking of projects from the outset, right? That can shed a light onto the specific challenges that you're facing. So I think this is one way in which research can be done to directly impact practice. The other way, of course, is when we use the insights from our research for building teaching materials, right? So I'm about to launch a module for our executive MBA course now in November that is entirely built on the research that I have been doing on entrepreneurs. So that is very much, again, translating to practice. I think Sophie has a great article recently applying the lean business model, right, to social value creation. So I think that is super useful as well, very, very practical for those here as well teaching. I think that is an article that is very easy to apply to teaching as well. So passing to you already, Sophie.
That's great. Thanks for the plug on the article. What I love about Elisa, we talk about practitioner, but you have a great kind of translation into students' minds. That's what I'm speaking about in my comments here. I'm saying that co-designing or translating in a way that you found whatever statistical significance or some mechanisms through an inductive study, you want to report them back. And I think it requires that where to find the practitioners. I mean, for many years, depending on where I was in the world, I didn't have a strong community of practitioners with whom I was interacting, because it takes time too. Like I was lacking time, young children, teaching requirements, tenure pressure and so on. I'm getting more and more involved here because also the institution I'm at really facilitates these interactions. So interactions are critical for speaking the language of others, and then you can co-design and come up with with insights that will be valuable and meaningful to practitioners. It's the last mile, but it's oftentimes forgotten. So great question.
Super, Sophie.
Yeah, add number 3, I think Sadek. Yeah, more
And there's one more question from Lauren asking about can we elaborate on key elements and types of state support that are most effective in fostering social entrepreneurship, and what recommendations would we offer to policymakers to better support social entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So here, I'm going to post the article in a minute. I was going to write to you. I think it's from Laurent, is one of my Belgian colleagues. Laurent, this question made me think of the studies more from an economist approach by Ute Steffen and colleagues, when they actually, I think they analyzed the GEM data and they used several institutional level moderators. I can try to post a few here, which then shows, under what conditions at a country level social entrepreneur activity rates are higher or lower. Maybe Sreevas, you can take it next, because that's more your level of analysis.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, like my PhD was around that. My PhD question was essentially around institutional conditions, how that influence individual actors to invest towards social entrepreneurship, and sort of the broad couple of lines that we found there was one, formal institutional mechanisms being favorable helps, but particularly the element around what kind of financial institutions exist in the country. For instance, when we sort of broke it out between sort of commercial finance and philanthropic finance, we saw that having more of the philanthropic finance support mechanism, which is we kind of measured it in terms of the volume of philanthropy that happens in a particular country. And we found that when that is there, that in fact incentivizes individuals to invest more of their personal financial resources towards starting a social enterprise, because there's a bit more of the financial philanthropic investment supporting it. And then from a cultural standpoint, we sort of found that countries with higher power distance, this is sort of the work that Ute Stephen and others have also worked on around institutional collectivism being favorable for social entrepreneurship to work, certain degree of higher degrees of uncertainty avoidance being favorable, all of those things. So this is sort of the stream of research that kind of talks about the cultural impact on social entrepreneurship. I'll kind of post a couple of the articles from that space in the chat as well. I think that is mostly our questions there, Debbie.
So yeah, and I think we kind of did this on that half-hour mark, so I know people have to leave and some opportunities there, but we wanted to give you the option if you want to go into breakout rooms and meet other faculty members, or if you want to keep this open for one more Q&A, and then we'll close up with some resources as well with Catalyst. So do we have any preferences, presenters?
Happy to break out if people are going to stay. I think we have about 5 to 8 minutes maybe to just say hello, catch up with a few people, and then come back.
Okay, 5 minutes will be really quick. So yeah, so we're going to go into some quick breakout rooms here. Just introduce yourselves, say hello if you want to talk a little bit about the research you're doing, and I'm going to put you in right now. You'll get a note to jump into that breakout room and introduce yourselves real quickly and share about your work, but we're only going to leave that. I'm going to have to close it up in about 5 minutes. And what I just want to share with you as we close up, obviously a huge thank you to our speakers, but we love to showcase the and ask you for a couple of things. One is we want to showcase the impact of this session, what suggestions you have for the session, more time in the breakout rooms, what have you. And so we'll launch a poll here, and Comey's doing that. So would love to have your feedback on the session itself. Helps us change and adjust to future sessions as well. As you're filling out the poll, of course, there's more updates to share as well. The next part of the Social Impact Educators series is on thinking about impact investing. So transformative impact insights from scholars in impact investing. So that'll be an interesting series if you'd like to join us there. And in the chat, my team will add in how to register for that. If you are from different parts of the world and you want to get involved in the academic hubs, quick overview of that is these are not in lieu of the existing networks that are already there in the region. We're trying to bring those networks together and share best practices, whether it's research or teaching experience. So if you're interested in joining one of these academic hubs, we will put that into the link as well, because there's lots of academic hubs. This exact session was actually hosted by the Europe Academic Hub, which Sreevas is one of the co-chairs of that group. So we want to share about that. I'm assuming 90% of you know about the Social Impact Educators with a Social Change Innovators platform. It was started by educators in 2018. There's over 2,000 now resources available on there. There's 12 teaching modules, and now we have all this other resources because of Catalyst 2030. So feel free to add your own teaching resources. There's an academic section on there as well. I need to get people to start adding their syllabi in there as well, but love to have you there. I did mention the Medium platform to take your academic article, really quick work, 1,200 words, really quick review, and your article get out there. There's over 5,000 members within Catalyst that are social entrepreneurs around the globe. So I'm going to end there without any more slides, but I do, and I should turn off my slides. Sorry about that. Where's my notes? Oh my goodness, come on. Where's my screen? Somebody kick me out of my screen. I've lost my, here we are, screen share, there you are. Thank you. But let's thank everyone for joining us. Sorry about whoever's shared there. Let's everyone say goodbye and to our speakers, and thank you. Unmute. You can say in your native language. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you, and we will share the video and all the notes from here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care all.